Chapter 15. Might as well be dead. Cheyenne snapped her head around to face the front door. What's the matter? Griffin asked. Someone's here. The car she had begun hearing a few seconds earlier pulled up outside the house fast enough that gravel scattered in its wake. Maybe it was someone coming to rescue her. She remembered the gun that Griffin had. Would he take her hostage? Cheyenne scooted to the far end of the couch, trying to get out of reach. Crap! Is it my dad? He clicked off the TV. She heard a car door open and close, then people talking. Just as quickly as they had bubbled up, her hopes burst. Although she couldn't make out the words, Cheyenne recognized the voices. It was Griffin's dad and the two men who worked for him. Quickly, she rubbed her scarf over her face. She didn't want anyone to see her tears, but it was a minute before they came in. She thought she heard another car door close. Finally, steps on the wooden porch. The door crashed open, and a cold wind blew over them. Fraternizing with the enemy? Roy said. He sounded, Cheyenne thought, drunk. The other two men laughed. Cheyenne was as tight as a guitar string. Hey, Griffin was trying too hard to sound casual. How'd it go? Instead of answering Griffin, Roy said, This is your cane, right? She heard him give it a shake. He must have retrieved it from the Escalade. There was the sound of metal grating on metal, a groan as some kind of door opened. Heat washed through the room. Cheyenne heard fluttering flames, smelled wood smoke. Roy said, We don't need to leave anything around that might come in handy for you. And then she heard him throw the cane into the stove. The door clanged closed. For so long, Cheyenne had hated her cane. Canes were for old people, handicapped people, not teenagers, not for people like her. But now, as the smell of the smoke changed, she felt lost. Her cane was made of fiberglass, so it might not burn, but the elastic cord that held the sections together certainly would, turning it into a useless bundle of rods. What happened? What's the matter? Griffin's voice sounded higher-pitched, scared. Not in front of her. What's she doing out here anyway? Roy didn't wait for an answer. She could hear him pacing back and forth. Put her back in your room. Then we need to talk. Griffin hustled Cheyenne away. He tied her ankle to the bed but left her hands free. Sorry, he said. She wasn't sure, but she thought she felt his hand brush the top of her hair. She felt oddly reluctant for him to leave. Who would come through the door next? Griffin might be bad, but she knew the other three men were worse. And why was Roy so angry? What had happened? Had her parents refused to pay a ransom? But that was impossible. Even before she heard him on TV, Cheyenne had known her dad would do anything to get her back. Maybe while she had been napping, Griffin had called Roy with the news about her escape attempt. Was that why he had thrown her cane into the wood stove? Smoke from the elastic cord still hung in the air, and Cheyenne started to cough, echoing wet, tearing coughs like she was going to cough up one of her lungs. When it finally stopped, she was covered in a light sheen of sweat, even though Griffin's room was cold. She found the quilt and pulled it over her. There was nothing else to do. She closed her eyes. Using a cane had been the first skill Cheyenne had had to learn after the accident, and the hardest. Her dad had wanted to let her go to the residential program, but Danielle had persuaded him. That was before Cheyenne's dad and Danielle started dating, before Danielle became her stepmother, back when she was just one of the voices of the nice nurses who cared for Cheyenne. Although in Danielle's case, not so nice. Danielle hadn't believed in spending too much time mourning what was lost. Instead, she wanted Cheyenne to focus on what she had, on what she could do. For the first few months after the accident, Cheyenne was basically in bed. First, it was because her broken body needed to heal. After the initial 10 days when she was out of danger, the hospital recommended that she be sent to a nursing home to recuperate. Her father wouldn't hear of it. His 13-year-old daughter surrounded by old people with strokes and broken hips? Instead, he paid for a private duty nurse to be with her 24 hours a day. One of them was Danielle. Once Cheyenne realized that she would never see again, she shut down. What was the point? The world was a scary place. The physical therapist wanted her to go to a special school where they would learn how to be blind. Cheyenne said no to everything, and her dad didn't argue. She didn't like to get out of bed. There was nothing around her, and how could she walk on nothing? If Cheyenne had to go someplace, she slid her feet as if she were on roller skates so that she could still have one foot on the world. All she had left for sure was her body, trembling and sweating, the churning in her stomach, the pounding in her temples, the sounds of her breathing. She no longer knew anything about the world. All she knew about was herself. Her world had shrunk to the edges of her skin. Every time her dad encouraged her to get up, Cheyenne complained that her head ached or that she felt dizzy. Sometimes it was even true. Sometimes she didn't know if it was true or not. Mostly she stayed in bed and listened to her music. Her dad would stand in the door of her room watching her. She could hear him, even if he didn't always say he was there, and Cheyenne would just turn her music up louder. Then, one day, Danielle popped the headphones out of her ears. "Hey!" Cheyenne protested. Her hands scrabbled over the bed covers trying to find them. "Listen," Danielle said, her voice brisk and matter-of-fact. "This is going to be one long, boring life if you don't learn how to function independently. At this rate, you might as well be dead." Cheyenne had held it together so well for weeks, but now she snapped. She was tired of sympathy, but this woman's expectations were way out of line. "Might as well be dead? I am dead. I'll never see anything again. Not a movie, not a person's face, not even my own face." She bogged down, thinking of all the things she wouldn't see. Flowers and dogs and the colors of her clothes and sunsets, leaves turning, TV shows and books, concerts, cute boys, cute actors, cute babies. What exactly was making a strange noise? The colors of gelato and the shiny metal tubs they were lined up in, cracks in the sidewalk, people laughing at her. Danielle's voice remained calm. "You're only 13. You've got your whole life ahead of you." "Don't give me any of that crap about how I'm only 13. My life is over. I'm never going to drive a car. I'm never going to go on a date, and I'll be lucky if I get a job in some shelter for the handicapped." Cheyenne made her voice sing-songy, furious that she could still hear the tears underneath. "I'm sick of people saying, 'You're still young. You'll adapt. God never closes the door, but he opens a window.' Well, that's all BS. I won't adapt. I'm blind. My mom's dead, and I'm blind." There was a long pause. Then Danielle said quietly, "You're right. But it is what it is, Cheyenne. You can't change it, so you have to deal with it. You have to figure out how to do things for yourself. You can make a life, and it can be a good one, but you have to try." From outside Cheyenne's closed door, her dad called, "What are you girls talking about in there?" "Go away," Cheyenne shouted. She didn't want him to see her with tears spilling out of her useless eyes. Then he would start crying too. She didn't want another pity party. She just wanted to forget. She just wanted to go to sleep and wake up and have it all be a bad dream. She waited until she heard her father's footsteps turn away. Then she said softly, "But it's too much. It's just too much." Danielle was relentless. "Aren't you getting tired of living like a baby, of having everyone do everything for you? Don't you want to learn how to do some things for yourself?" It was true. Cheyenne was starting to feel like a baby trapped in a 13-year-old body. Sometimes her dad even fed her. She kept still for a long time, and then slowly she nodded. She felt Danielle settle on the bed beside her. Her arms went around Cheyenne. For a second, Cheyenne stiffened, and then she let herself be rocked back and forth while Danielle made a shh, shh sounds in her ear. That was how her dad had found them. Later, after Danielle and her dad told Cheyenne they were getting married, she wondered if Danielle hadn't somehow planned being found like that to show that she could take Cheyenne's mom's place. Still, Danielle hadn't been wrong, and because of her encouragement, Cheyenne had learned how to do a lot of things for herself, more than she had ever thought possible in the first horrible weeks after the accident. Most of what she had learned had been at a residential school 2 hours from her home. Many of the people there were like Cheyenne, in shock, wondering what had happened to them. She remembered in particular one guy who kept saying, "But how will I be able to do things if I can't drive?" After a while, she wanted to slug him. He was 40 at least, so he had had a life. He had had his chance. Cheyenne hadn't even really gotten started. Her mom had let her drive once in the cemetery near their house, but now she would never get to for real. And her mom was buried in that same cemetery. Cheyenne had never even been to her grave. At first, when she was at school, Cheyenne had felt like an alien who had just landed on the planet. She had had to relearn things that she had known how to do for so long that she didn't remember not knowing them. How to feed herself, how to dress herself, how to walk without bumping into things. One of the first things she learned was how to use a cane. Surprisingly light, the cane had a rubber handle like a golf club and a plastic tip. The cane would be folded up into a little neat bundle of sticks. Cheyenne resolved to keep it folded up and hidden away as much as possible. When the instructors told her it glowed in the dark, she imagined how it would give her away at night, the one time she might have a slight advantage over sighted people. Still, while she was at school, surrounded by other blind people, she decided to learn how to use it. Danielle had told Cheyenne a Bible verse, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." Using a cane was like that. Each step was like stepping into nothing until she felt solid ground under her feet again. It made a taka-taka sound. "Touch, don't, tap," the instructor said. They taught her how to sweep it from side to side like a metal detector, touching the spot where the next foot would land. When she stepped forward to the left, she tapped on the right. If there was a hole or something in her way, the cane would find it first. Going downstairs, she held her cane directly in front of her and learned to trust that it would tap when she reached the bottom. Through the feedback she got from the cane, Cheyenne learned to feel gates, ups, downs, carpeting, tile, wood, gravel, curbs, grass, and swishing revolving doors. And she learned that it wasn't just that the cane could tell her what was directly in her path. If she listened closely, she could tell whether the sound it made was bouncing off a brick wall or echoing in an open doorway or rebounding off an awning overhead. Even without the cane, she could sometimes tell if there was something ahead of her, like a tree or a telephone pole. As a blind person, Cheyenne had to interpret every shred of information she could get from her other senses. Everyone thought the blind had special abilities, but it was really that they had just learned to pay attention, that they had to pay attention. Now, as she lay on Griffin's bed, Cheyenne remembered the first time the instructors had had her venture out on her own. She had walked down a city street, listening to other people's footsteps around her, fearful she might hit one of them with her cane. That was before she realized that a cane was good for crowd control. Once they saw it, people usually gave her a wide berth. She wondered if they were staring. At one point, she thought she heard someone whispering, but she told herself she was imagining it. After a couple of blocks, her breath finally began to come easier. "Are you blind?" someone asked, startling her. The voice belonged to a young boy. Cheyenne turned, not sure she was looking in the right direction. She took a deep breath and let it out. "Yes." "You must be really bad." Then she heard the sound of his footsteps running away. At the end of each day, she was there for 3 months, coming home only on weekends. Cheyenne had fallen into bed and slept so hard she didn't even dream. In some ways, she was glad. In other ways, she wished desperately to spend time with her mother again, even if it was only in a dream. The few times she did dream about her mother, Cheyenne was always searching through a huge crowd, only to finally catch a glimpse of as her mom left a room. When the yelling began outside Griffin's door, Cheyenne was so deeply asleep she didn't hear it.